Thank you all for being here. We're joined by many of my colleagues in government, School Committee Member Donna Coppola, School Committee Member Lorraine Gately, School Committee Member Brian Castellanos, Councilor Rick Starbird, Councilor Dan Jakutis, and former Mayor Tom McGee. All right. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the whole committee. We'll go shortly from the superintendent. We'll let everybody's name called after this, because we will go from the public forum into a meeting of the school building committee. This portion of the evening is the open public meeting where we would like to report out to you all where we are and open it up for comments. And the reason why we're doing that is because our administration and this school building committee has really prioritized wanting to run a process that is transparent and accessible and open to people's ideas and comments. And so we were here a couple months ago to talk about the site selection process. And as you all recall, we designated a preferred site. What you're going to hear tonight is more detail about various configurations of that site and some of the pros and cons of the different configurations, as well as a recommendation for a particular configuration that, based on the diligence in the examination of the site in depth, that was the next step following the selection of the preferred site, have come up and really sort of lends itself to that recommendation. So before we made that formal decision, we wanted to make sure that we had this opportunity to update you, the public, on those advancements and those deliberations. So that's what we plan to do tonight, and then immediately following, we will go into the formal school building committee meeting. So as you all know, this is a top priority for our community, the new Pickering Middle School, top priority for the school committee and the school department. It really has benefits for the entire community, and with the possibilities it will open at the middle school level. And we also recognize it's a huge project. It's a huge project financially. It's a huge project logistically, and we really want to make every effort to deliver both in the process and in the result, something that we can all be really proud of. And we will continue to keep everybody updated as we go forward. So thank you.
I also would like to welcome all of you to tonight. I also would like to introduce you to our new superintendent-elect. This is Dr. Yvonne Alvarez. We're very pleased to have her here tonight. It has been very important to us to keep the community informed throughout this process. And tonight is an opportunity for you to hear an update, but also to give your input and feedback and ask any questions. I don't want to delay the process any further, so I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Stapleton and Jean Raymond to help you understand where we're at this point.
Yeah. And just quick on, if anyone needs translation, we have translators here. Si alguien necesita traducción, tenemos esto.
We have Portuguese, Arabic,
Spanish?
there we go,
Translator?
and Haitian Creole on
Spanish right here. So, okay. Great.
So my name's Gene Raymond. I'm with Raymond Design Associates. We're the architects on the project. And sitting to my right is Lynn Stapleton from LeftField, and they are the owner's project manager. So they're kind of the interface between the school building committee and the administration. Make sure we do what we're supposed to do. We also make sure that the project stays in line with the requirements for the state grant. through the Massachusetts School Building. So as Mayor Nicholson noted, we're gonna run through, if we can get the slides to change, where all the various options we've looked for once the school building committee determined that of those various sites we were taking a look at last December when we were here. This site, Magnolia Park / Sisson Pickering, was determined to be the probably the best of all the various sites. And we looked at a number of different options, how we could build this project on the site. Oh, sure. I'm sorry, a little closer. Yeah. Sorry about that. I won't repeat all that though. It's kind of long. So when we were last here in December, you may remember, but we were looking at a whole bunch of different options in Precinct 1, you know, everything from Gowdy Park way up north down to where we are tonight at Magnolia Park. And we looked at some private and some public sites, and the school building committee, I think wisely, determined that for a variety of reasons, including traffic and all sorts of different things, that the Magnolia Park site was probably was the best site to take a look at. So we started looking at how we could build a project on Magnolia Park. And just to orient you, this has a lot of circles and colors. Magnolia Avenue is right here. Flax Pond is across the street. It doesn't show, it's off the page. And if you kept going down, you'd end up at Wyoma Square. The tennis courts out behind Sisson and the Sisson play area are here. So Pickering's up at the top and Sisson of the page, and Magnolia Park was our first focus. So one of the things we knew about it was that it was landfill, and because there used to be, depending whether you thought it was a river, stream, or just wetlands, but there was a connection between Sluice Pond and Flax Pond, and it ran through here. So we had to understand what the soils were going to be like down below the surface, and how we assumed they were going to be marshy and mucky and maybe some fill. So we had to understand how we were going to support a building on this site, what the foundations were going to be like. And so all these places that we have circles, we either dug down with a backhoe to see what we could see, or the ones that were yellow, we actually did what they call borings, but we sent a tube down until we hit bedrock. And the bedrock in this case happened to be 160 feet below the surface of the park. A few years back, we had been involved with the Thurgood Marshall Middle School, and that also had soil conditions that weren't adequate for normal foundations. So we did do we put a bunch of what we call pilings in the ground. Those were only 100 feet deep. And this project is about the same size, but we figured out we'd have to go down almost twice as far. And that, in our minds, we're saying, wow, that's going to be really expensive. And when it was all said and done, we figured out just to put the foundations in the ground at Magnolia Park was going to be about $20 million. So you'd have $20 million just buried in the ground with no real benefit except that you could support a building on top of it. The other thing that happened while we were in this phase, we always knew that part of Magnolia, well, let me orient you again. Here's Flax Pond and Sluice Pond and Pickering and Sisson. So down in the park, kind of where the baseball field is what's called a floodplain. And then the government, the FEMA agency, is actually proposing, and like I say, this came while we were actually studying the site. They're proposing that the whole of Magnolia Park be determined as a floodplain. So that just adds more complications as well. You have to raise the building up out of the floodplain. You have to think about how you're going to get to it in a situation where there may be flooding, et cetera, et cetera. So between the soils and the floodplain, we started saying to ourselves, we're going to have to look at a number of options, and maybe some of them don't involve staying on the park. So MSBA requires that you look at, not as a realistic option, but that you assess the building you're in, and you tell yourself, you figure out, like, what if we did nothing for the educational program, but we just brought the building up to current day code? And I think they want you to understand that no matter what you do, it would be, we think about $71 million, 100% city cost just to bring this building up to all the various codes. You might not have to, you won't have to spend all this just to renovate it and use it as a school, but that's one of the options we have to do. They also wanted us to look at an addition renovation. Believe it or not, there's no room left on this site because we can't go towards Sisson, so we'd end up taking properties between here and Broadway. That would be about $203 million. Down on Magnolia Park, we looked at a couple options, and I'll show you all of these, but if we just stayed on Magnolia Park and built a building, we'd spend about $195 million. We looked at putting part of the building on Magnolia and then having a bridge over to kind of where the tennis courts are right now at Sisson and the play area. That also is around $200 million. And finally, we said to ourselves, let's see what happens if we just build next to Sisson. And we ended up with a building that was a little bit higher, more compact, but it got us out of all the mess with the foundations at Magnolia Park.
So a little bit about what these costs represent. These aren't hard, fast numbers at this point. They are order of magnitude cost, and they are for the sole purpose of comparing the probable cost of each option. And it's a decision-making tool in selecting a preferred option. I just wanted everyone to be clear that these are preliminary numbers at this point. We've also added within the project cost that you saw on the previous page some safeguards that, in each of the options construction cost estimates to mitigate construction market volatility, as well as mitigate the fact that this is actually a conceptual phase design. We have a design and pricing contingency in there, 15%. This covers any missing design scope at this point in the process, as well as covering any pricing gaps in the estimates. We have 11% of escalation built into the construction cost, and again, the escalation is used to cover cost from today's date to the start of construction. We have what we call a GMP construction contingency. That's a guaranteed maximum price construction contingency of 2.5%. And this contingency is within the construction cost, and it also is there to help mitigate scope gaps within the bids. We also have a couple of external contingencies outside the construction cost, and these are also used to mitigate unforeseen costs or risks, and to help us maintain the total project budget from this point throughout construction. Our external construction contingency is 5%, and it's used to fund changes within the construction documents as construction is proceeding. And we have a 1% owner's contingency, which is used for any unforeseen costs within the project. If we need an additional consultant to help us with something, we have a bucket of money to pull from, or any other unforeseen work associated with the project.
Great, thanks, Lynn. So, do we want to take questions as we go?
Was Can you define the order of magnitude cost? Because you're at 9 figures and there's a lot of wiggle room in there. I mean, I go from 900 million to 200 million. I just want some clarity on that.
These costs have been estimated by two different estimators at this point. Again, they're based on conceptual drawings that you'll see shortly. They're estimated based on quantities that have been provided to the estimator by the design team. And it's the estimators that we're using are accustomed to doing estimates for school design within the state. They're some of the most, the estimators have done most of their work is school construction within Massachusetts. So there is a little bit of past history built into these numbers, but we will continue to refine these numbers. Like I said before, these costs are for comparable purposes, and we've got them as close as we can get them with the information that we have to date. But again, we will continue to refine these numbers as we move into a more detailed design phase.
Can I just share, there's another quick, did you have something else, Jean, you wanted to add to that?
Oh, I was just going to say that these numbers are going to change. So we wrap it in this phrase, order of magnitude. This is about what we would expect the final numbers to come in at, but we're at such an early stage of the design work. I mean, there's still probably a year and a half of detailed design and a number of estimates that get done between now and the end.
What kind of confidence interval do you have on that?
I'm sorry?
What kind of competence interval do you have? I mean, you're at 170, but you're using words like what order of magnitude, and where's the wiggle room?
We actually have a lot of confidence in it, but we just want to make it clear that these numbers are not precise and the final number is going to vary. We know it's going to vary. But Lynn rolled through all the contingencies that were included in these numbers, and the reason for those is to make sure that we're not exceeding these numbers. If anything, they should come down.
At our last school building committee meeting, the school building committee voted to go with a construction manager at risk construction delivery method. We'll be bringing on the construction manager in the schematic design phase. So we will have 3 estimators, the actual construction manager that will be building the building, providing estimates, when we try to solidify the cost in advance of going to the state for their portion of the funding.
I have one question from the webinar. What are any proposals, if any, for traffic remediation on Euclid, Western Ave, and which are already both overburdened by commercial and regular traffic? So they're talking about the traffic patterns and what are we doing for them?
We are, as part of this study, where we actually have a detailed traffic analysis underway. We don't have the final results of it, but it does deal with more than just the immediate area. We're also trying to think about where other pupils and parents might be coming from the city, because the school is going to be larger than it is now, which is one of the reasons that the detailed traffic analysis isn't completed 100% to date. But we're very, very aware of the traffic issues in the city.
Excuse me. Right over here. My name's Jafel Campbell. I actually live on Canoma. So just a couple of questions. So I'm a health and safety manager by trade. Went to school for a college degree, the whole nine, right? One of the things that I see about your costs, yeah, it's nice, but are we taking things into account like inflation? And then on top of that, what are we providing to the people in this community? So my question for you is, are we taking into consideration vibration monitoring, since you're going to be driving piles? Are we going to be monitoring debris because of, OSHA standards and things of that nature in regards to silica and things of that nature? And on top of that, what are we doing for the people in this community? I understand the cost, and I understand from a financial perspective, you guys want to find something that's feasible, and from a cost perspective, it's cheaper and makes sense for everyone. But, we just have concerns being in this neighborhood for the last 20 years and just hearing a structure is going to be, you know, in my backyard. Things of that nature. So how are you guys going to manage things as far as hot works and things of that nature? Are you guys going to require these guys to be trained by the NFPA, right? So they meet the requirements of NFPA 51B. Are we going to have Lynn Fire associated with this whole entire construction process, right? Because there is a construction management plan that has to get delivered and approved by the city, right?
Yep.
So what cost has been set aside so that way the questions for the communities and the issues for the communities can be answered? You know, I know it's a lot that I just unloaded on you, but what exactly are we going to be doing? Because I understand from a cost perspective, it probably makes sense to go with the, you know, bedrock that's at 35 and 50. From a cost perspective, it is a lot cheaper to put it just right in the backyard. It's a lot easier, but then it's also, I don't know if anyone in this room has been around, dropping piles is about 210 decibels. It's a loud noise. The hours, right, that work is going to be continued, and then on the other hand, is the city going to make exceptions when the schedule gets tight, because it always gets tight on a construction project, for earlier starts, later shifts? Are we going to think about this, or are we going to say, you know, from 1 hour, from 7 to 5? Like, what exactly is the whole entire game plan? And I understand that we're in the early stages, and it's probably going to take 2 to 3 years for this whole thing to become solidified. Just curious.
Well, as I said, in a couple of months, we'll have a construction manager on, and one of the benefits of bringing the construction manager on earlier is the pre-planning and logistics of construction that we'll be working with them to develop as we develop the design. Also, I will say that this will be, yes, we'll have seismic monitoring, we'll have air quality monitoring, and we'll have sound monitoring on the site on a continuous basis. Part of that we do, as the OPM will have a site representative on site, and we have all of that equipment to do those monitoring, do that monitoring for the basic construction. However, when we do, if we have to do piles in that, and I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves on this because you'll have to see the options that are available here, but we will have a full-time seismograph on site and a geotechnical engineer monitoring that throughout the process with the piles. If any of you remember, we did the piles on Thurgood Marshall. We did a pre-existing condition survey of all the houses within, I think it was in a 350-foot radius. And actually, we didn't turn anybody down that wanted a pre-existing conditions survey. We had representatives on site to address any issues that people felt they were having as a result of the pile driving, and that was handled. As far as I recall, we had no one that had any adverse effects of the pile driving operations at Thurgood Marshall. So we would strive to maintain those same procedures on this school if we need to do piles in it. And again, I said, I think we need to look at the options so you can see what your options are for piles or no piles.
Yeah. Then I just want to add in the health and safety issues. That is all baked into that. And there are professionals on the site who will be monitoring air quality, as Lynn said, the materials that are coming out of the ground, making sure they're going to the right place. So it's one of the, it's a soup to nuts numbers.
The construction manager will have a safety manager on site on a daily basis, and especially building right up against existing elementary schools. That's more important than on a wide open site. There'll be a quality assurance plan in place as well. We'll talk a little bit more when we get into the various options on what the community is getting back as a result of the various options available. And then maybe you might have more questions after you see the options.
So as I said, we looked at a number of options. We're going to go through the 4 that make the most sense, and then I can kind of pause at the end of each one. But the final one is our recommendation to the city, and you all may or may not agree with it, but I just want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time to go through all these. So the first one that the MSBA requires you look at is to put an addition on the building. Whether or not it makes sense, it's one of their regulations that you have to look at doing an addition. So Canomo Ave is left to right where the red dot is. Magnolia Field is down here where I'm circling. The existing Pickering is right in this area, and the existing Sisson wing is over here with the Sisson playground and the tennis courts. Sisson must stay in operation, so we cannot add to the building headed this way. The city has the baseball field down here, which is also a no-touch zone, so we can't come out to the rear. And really the only place that we could do an addition renovation, and believe me, this is the most expensive option, it's the most disruptive, and it really doesn't make sense. We're not recommending it. But the only way that you could fit an addition would be to take the properties between Pickering and Broadway. I think there's 4 properties, including a church, the old library, and then this is the approximate footprint along with renovating part of Pickering that you would need for the educational program for 1,100 pupils. No pilings, but a long duration, because building the addition's the same amount of time as it takes to build a new building. Then you finish that, you move the kids into it, but then you have to spend another probably a year renovating the existing building. So between the takings, the longer duration, the disruption, this is not a, it's not a design that we're recommending. Whenever we were meeting with the school building committee, we didn't want to just show them plans. So we always wanted people to have some 3D images and get a sense. I won't go in detail on all of them. You know, this is Magnolia Park in the foreground. You go up the hill. This is the Sisson play area, the modulars, the Sisson wing, and then what we would leave for Pickering. And then this is the scope of what the new addition would be, because we're not headed down onto the baseball field. We've developed floor plans for all these options. So these 3-dimensional images, the site plans, the floor plans, all went to both professional cost estimators, which was the genesis of some of those numbers that we showed you earlier. This again is just another view, if you're a bird's eye view above Wyoming Square, you know, what it might look like, and if you are kind of over the intersection of Canomo Ave and Broadway, what it might look like. So you'd have the original Pickering, Sisson in the background, and then you'd have this big chunk of school where you have to take all those properties. So that's option 5B, it was called, an addition renovation. Again, we didn't recommend it because it's most expensive, most disruptive to the neighborhood and to live through. I don't know if anyone has any questions about it. The next one we looked at was leaving the existing Pickering in place, leaving Sisson in place with the Sisson playground, and then concentrating all the construction down on Magnolia Park. We know between the 3 schools how many parking spaces would be needed, and we've shown them all so that our site costs are accurate. This is the footprint of a 4-story building, similar to the Thurgood Marshall. And with this, this is where we would need the 160-foot deep pilings. And speaking of noise and disruption, that would be, there'd be a lot of banging for a lot of months. I don't know, is that up on the screen? Is it? I'm sorry. Maybe I can move it to the side. How about that? Thank you, Lynn. So what that might look like, again, Pickering and Sisson remain in play. The new parking is kind of here off Magnolia. Like Thurgood Marshall, there'd be a 4-story academic wing and a 2-story community wing. The community wing is used by the school, but it's a gym, the cafetorium, locker rooms, things that might be used by the community after hours. And again, floor plans that show all the spaces that are in the educational program, and another view as if you were up over Flax Pond with the Housing Authority buildings here. By the way, any of these white buildings, these are just kind of what we call wireframe diagrams. You know, they're not like buildings are disappearing. We're just trying to put our massing in context with what's there. So if you were up above Konomo and Sisson was over here on the right, you'd be looking down into the park on this 4-story academic and 2-story community wing. So we also, given the expense of the foundations here and also the risks, we probably, when we think we know what's in the soil, but even when you start construction, you might find something a little different, because don't forget, there's a lot of fill here. We did not recommend this as a preferable option. I don't know if anyone has any questions about it. Okay. There's 2 more. So because the foundations were so expensive, we looked at saying, what if we just put the 4-story academic building down on Magnolia, and we do the 2-story community wing up on the Sisson Plateau, and we connect them with a bridge, because this blue line here is an MWR water line serving some other communities, and we cannot build on top of it. Again, we did the floor plans, and this is what it might look like from Magnolia. We have a better kind of view. This is what it might look like from Konomo with this 2-story community wing up here. And then you can just start to see a bridge that would go over and connect to the 4-story academic wing. But in a situation like this, we're pretty much taking up the Sisson playground and the tennis courts, and we still end up spending a lot of money on foundations down on Magnolia because of the bridge and the inefficiencies in building 2 separate buildings. It's a little more square footage. So this one ended up pretty much in the same ballpark as the option before. So that left us to say, let's not do anything down on Magnolia. Maybe we can use it for parking and maintain it as a community park, right, for the neighborhood. And what if we took down the modulars that are attached to Sisson, and we know where we could replace those classrooms within the shell of the existing building. And what if we tucked in a building between, well, to the right of Sisson here. Now, this building would be, it's kind of like a house that's built into the hillside and has a walkout basement. The ground floor would have 5 stories. This is kind of the walkout. But the rest of the building would be buried into the hillside, so that along Magnolia and Konomo, it's a 4-story structure like we accomplished over at the Thurgood Marshall. Magnolia stays as a park. Well, it stays as play area, maybe under the control of the school department, but we don't have to deal with any of the utilities down here, and best of all, we don't have to spend any money on deep pile foundations. We think that we might have to do a little bit of work on foundations here, but nothing as far as piles. The soils up there are much better. So we still have the ability to have a community wing kind of buried inside the ground floor of the building. And we have all the other spaces for the educational program. And this is a bird's eye view where you'd have, we treat the first couple stories as we did at Thurgood Marshall with maybe a darker color base, but then everything that would be above that would be nice white panels and we keep saying it will not be looming over the neighborhood. We also want to maintain a buffer so that we can treat it with evergreen trees, and we want to do that for the neighbors on Konomo and Magnolia. Sure.
So
Yeah,
I have someone who has submitted 3 questions via the website.
Okay.
First question, as a parent of 2 students at Sisson, a concern of mine is outside time. Since our students do not have space within the school for lunch or specials, their only time out of the classroom is during recess or gym. Currently, we utilize the tennis courts for gym and the schoolyard for recess. Where would that take place during construction for the next 2 years?
When we phase this project, the permanent Sisson play area is going to be down at the Magnolia field level, and we're going to replace hard surface. We are currently in the process of adjusting this plan, but we would have hard surface like they do now, and then also we would connect it to the play fields. So they'd actually end up with more play area and a better variety. Does that make sense?
Yep. And then there's a second question.
Oh, Deb, I'm going to back up. I'm sorry. During the construction period, which could be a couple of years, it would be phased construction. And this would be among the first, this play area would be among the first things that get constructed, so that they're never without a play area while we're building the new school.
The second question, I understand that there will be adjustments made during construction, but how is there not a concern for quality of learning? It seems like a major construction site that's taking place during learning hours would inhibit a child's learning capabilities. I appreciate all the work that's being put into this project and truly look forward to the outcome. I know that there will be some shifting that needs to take place for the completion, but I also want to make sure my children and others at Sisson will have 2 successful years during construction.
Yes, no matter, there's no doubt, I'm not going to say it's not going to be disruptive. During different periods, it's going to, some may be banging, some may be cutting, some may be earth moving. So that is going to happen. But no matter where we built, anywhere on this site, we would have some sort of disruption like that. And it's up to us to manage it. The nice thing about Sisson is there would be no windows facing the construction area. All the windows face either Konomo or Magnolia.
Most schools that we build in Massachusetts, because of the shortage of land, are right up against existing schools. And I think if you go and ask any of the schools that remain in operation during the construction period, they will tell you that the construction is very well maintained and, to a point that it's not disruptive to the educational learning.
Was there another question?
No, that was it.
Oh, okay.
I thought there were 3.
Can I follow up with that?
Sure.
Hi, I'm a parent and also a teacher at Sisson. I have a follow-up question about that. So Sisson doesn't have an HVAC system like that brings in cool air. And the second floor of the building, especially because where my particular classroom is, on one side, we have the sun baking in the windows, and then we have, below us, we have the Pickering ovens, and above that we have Sisson's ovens, and then everything directly heats up the second floor. So I have my windows open almost all year long to cool the classroom down. So I do have a concern about the noise and the ability to maintain children's focus through that much distraction, because we cannot leave the windows shut. So that is a major concern that I have with that, because the not having an HVAC system that cools the air and circulates the air in the system.
That makes a lot of sense. I happen to know that the city is in the process of putting a new HVAC system into Sisson, believe it or not, right at this, you know, it's kind of in the design phase right now. But I would expect, assuming it goes forward, which I don't know why it wouldn't, that you would be all set by the time construction starts.
I'll also say that the construction manager has to maintain all city noise ordinances as well.
So for a number of reasons, this is the one that has the least financial risk to the city, and we feel like it's a smaller, well, it's not smaller, but it's more compact building, and it'll have all sorts of operational efficiencies as well going forward. So one of the questions has been, well, if one of the first phases is taking down the modular classrooms so you can construct this, where would those classrooms go? Where would those kids or programs go? So there are currently 2 kindergarten classrooms and 2 special ed classrooms in those modulars. Then there's another smaller office. And we have studied the existing Pickering building, which is over here on the right, and then the Sisson classroom wing is over here on the left. There are former locker room spaces that are not used, and we could create, you know, next to Sisson, right? So kids don't have to go all the way through Pickering to get to them. We could create a couple of classrooms in what's currently unused space with windows and connected to Sisson with a fairly simple renovation project next to the gymnasium. We could also take the space we're in tonight and we could put up temporary partitions, because this space could be restored, but we could fit 3 classrooms if you make use of the stage and the seating area, just in this area alone. So this might come offline for the construction period, but again, it could be put back together. And between those spaces, there is more than enough room to house the programs that are in the Sisson modulars right now. And then finally, I think Lynn's going to talk a little bit about the construction, but go ahead.
So we are in the preferred schematic report phase, which is this phase here. This is where we're asking to pick a preferred option. From that point, we'll go into schematic design, and at that point, we will solidify what the scope of the project is, as well as determine a total project budget that will stick with us from the beginning through the end of construction. At that point, we will ask for MSBA's approval and ask for what their share of the cost will be, and then the city would have to approve their part of the funding for the project. We'll go into about a 12 to 14 month design period, and as I said before, with a construction manager at risk, we'll be able to start construction early. And right now we're showing starting, actually, I had said earlier it was in the fall, but it is showing here a start in early 2024, with the main construction starting later that year. But it's a 25-month construction time frame, and at that point we'll be done by the time school's out, and we will start the move process and the fit out process with furniture, and all in time for a school start of in September of 2026.
So we're obviously here to take questions. I know we talked a lot, but we wanted to explain everything we've looked at, kind of some of the pros and cons of the various options, and where we landed. The school building committee has not voted on anything, and the idea is to see from the community if there's something that we haven't thought about. So with that, I guess I'll stop talking.
Any questions?
Any questions on that?
We're just giving the Zoom folks a chance to type their questions if they have any. Yes.
Just real quick, just listen to everything, it pretty much makes sense that you guys are gonna put it back here, right? So what exactly, are we going to have security like during after hours and things of that nature? Because obviously break-ins and things like that during the construction phase is always a risk, being around the trade for the 10 years, right? So what exactly are you guys going to do as far as making it a requirement to have security details and things of that nature while construction isn't operating, right? So, you know, after hours on the weekends.
There will be cameras on site.
Just cameras?
Well, I will say that at Thurgood Marshall, we started out with cameras. We did have a couple of break-ins, and then we put a full-time security guard on site. So there will be provision, if we need a full-time security guard on site here, we will put one here as well.
So what you're saying is we have to have break-ins before we get security, is that what you're saying? I'm not trying to give you a hard time, I just want to understand. I'm here to represent
well,
the parents, and I just want to make sure I
right.
transmit the best message over.
Just to be clear, it's very costly to put 24-hour security guards on site. We would, if we felt like we had an issue, we would put them on. But we wouldn't automatically start out with them unless there was a reason to have them.
I have a question that came in. Would the modulars be returned to the site post-construction or moved somewhere else post-construction?
The answer to that's not fixed in stone at this point. We would need to take a real hard look. Those are fairly old and perhaps it might be difficult to move them or salvage them and replace them. Oh, yes, people are wishing in my ears. Yes, that's true, but one of the things I did not mention with any of these options is subsequent to construction of the new middle school, this entire building becomes available. So we've talked over and over again how Sisson could make use of the cafeteria. Right now they don't have a cafeteria. That Sisson doesn't have a gym, so it could make use of this gym. Sisson, I think someone mentioned that the specials, there's no space for specials such as art or music or computer. So again, the thought in our mind is this entire building will be available, and I think as part of the master plan, it's going to free up space to improve not only Sisson, but maybe some other elementary issues you have.
Is there a plan to put any work into it? Because as it is right now, it's really not in the best condition. So
Right.
when Sisson takes over, are they going to put a little upgrade on the cafeteria? Probably not.
Again, that's hard. It's hard for me to promise that. I just know that I can't imagine that some work wouldn't be done. I can't tell you exactly what it would be. Sure.
Just the other thing I think is worth mentioning there, the city and the school committee and authorized facilities master plan at the elementary level with the idea that once we get this Pickering, we need to tackle the elementaries next, and we want to start that thinking now so that we'll be prepared to do that when the time comes. That work is ongoing. It's at a much higher level than all this, obviously, but thinking about where the need is and what the sort of options are on a citywide level. There's going to be a lot that goes into that, not just the thinking of what we want to do, but whether or not what the city will be able to afford to do. But though I can tell you that our administration and my colleagues are really committed at tackling what the needs are at the elementary level as well.
I mean, Sisson isn't the worst off of,
Right.
of all the elementaries. But when we're acquiring the space from Pickering isn't in the best condition, so.
The building's not the worst condition, but the use of space is probably one of the worst in the city, because there's just no way to do anything.
Yeah, and this is true, as you know, in a lot of the elementaries.
Believe it or not, we used to share that space. I went to Sisson as a kid, and it was attached because it was utilized for both. When it was raining out, we used to close the gym in half and use half of it. And of course, you know, Lynn's a great city, and a lot of people want to move here and raise their families here, so that increased, and they're not able to do that anymore. So I think that it's needed for Sisson and Pickering to that. My main concern was can't close windows, and construction is loud. Like, we need to help those kids, so that's why I'm here tonight for that. So.
Yeah, and this is really helpful. I think we recognize, like we said, that this is a huge project, and so having these conversations that help the school building committee think through what we want to sort of insist on during the construction process, so that we are able to make this livable for folks. So I appreciate it.
I have a couple of questions. I'm going to actually ask two questions that seem to be linked together. They're from two different people, though. The first one is around the classrooms that are going to be created because of the modular being taken down. Are costs to change Sisson included in these costs, or will the city need to find funds for that? And then second to that, Sisson lacks classroom space, so the modular classrooms that are moved to the existing Pickering space, would that become permanent?
So the first question, I'll do the second question first. The spaces that we create at the Pickering, the auditorium space would be temporary for the construction period. So we would restore the auditorium. It's fairly simple to take the seats up and put in some partitions. The spaces that we might create in the unused areas next to the gymnasium would be outfitted to current day standards. So they could be considered, permanent for Pickering.
Those costs are also included in the cost estimates.
It's part of the phasing plan. Like before a shovel goes in the ground out at the playground, as I mentioned before, the first part of the project would be making the new playground for Sisson down on Magnolia. It would be creating these spaces within Pickering and then removing the modular classrooms.
Great. So while everybody's thinking of the last question, if they have any, just a note on what's going to happen next. So shortly, if there's no more questions, we're going to conclude the public meeting portion of tonight, and then we will begin the school building committee. And so we'll call the roll for the school building committee members. Everyone is welcome to stay. It's an open meeting. However, it's not a public comment meeting, so if folks have things they want to share, now's the time to do that. And then, of course, you're welcome to speak with any of us after the meeting. Any final? Yeah.
I have two questions. I'm a teacher here at Pickering. My first question is, how much of the cost will the state pick up? I also live in the city, so that's a concern. How much of the cost, I know that it's a projected amount, but do we have an idea of what they will pick up? And the second thing is, if Sisson will be using this building temporarily, again, I spend my day with middle schoolers and I know how they are, what is going to avoid middle schoolers mixing in with our elementary students? So like, is it gonna be blocked off? Are they gonna be going outside to transition to whatever other things that they have? Has that been thought of? Because again, middle school and elementary, not a great mix together.
I can first start off by saying that I'll let Jean address the segregating the elementary and middle school. But in terms of cost, the effective rate is somewhere around 42% funded by MSBA. That's not a hard set number right now. I know the city is working hard on increasing that amount. And we will also, as a project team, work to increase that amount as well by making sure we stay within MSBA guidelines to the extent possible, because the more that we do that, the higher reimbursement we get. We didn't purposely show those numbers because it won't start to become finalized until we get their comments back on our preferred option and our preferred educational space summary, and as we continue to develop the schematic design. At some point in schematic design, we'll know what that reimbursement rate will be definitively. But right now, it's somewhere around the 42%.
I just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit before we hit your other point, because this is a topic we discussed at the last school committee meeting. You heard that the effective reimbursement rate right now is projected to be about 42%. The way the MSBA is set up is that there's a formula that determines what the rate would be based on a number of factors, including community wealth and community income, and the maximum is 80%. We fit the definition of a community that would be eligible for the maximum. There's a lot of costs that aren't qualified for reimbursement, so it was never going to be 80%. For Marshall, it was somewhere in the 60s. And the reason why it went all the way down to 40-something% was because of the rapid increase in construction costs over the last year, and the fact that the reimbursement rate that the MSBA uses hasn't kept pace with that. There was an increase, but not nearly what the actual increase is. This is a huge issue for us as a community, because at an effective reimbursement rate of 42%, it creates real challenges for our ability to afford the project. So this is something we've discussed with the school building committee. Our state delegation has been incredibly helpful in helping us raise this issue. We've had good conversations with the state stakeholders, the MSBA, the treasurer, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Executive Office of Education, the administration, and the school committee. Actually, at our last meeting, we all sent a letter to the treasurer laying out the issue, and we're continuing those conversations because we really believe this needs to be addressed. As you might imagine, we are not the only community facing this issue. The increase in costs has affected a lot of projects. It's affected everybody everywhere on everything because prices have gone up, but this is particularly an issue for school construction because of the way the MSBA works. And so we're also in touch with those communities as well.
And then just getting back to the question about the segregation between elementary and middle school. You can see that we drew this blue oval, and we shaded out what might be 4 classrooms that are directly adjacent to the Sisson. And that was our thought, that the unused space next to the gym, and maybe you take over a couple of the Pickering classrooms, and maybe Pickering picks up some of the temporary classrooms in the auditorium. So whether it's a temporary door or some means of segregating what would be an expanded Pickering expanded Sisson from the Pickering, making use of the auditorium. But we do understand the issue, and we know that we need to address it, and it will be addressed.
And you put a barrier up here.
Yep.
I also want to note, the school department is committed to, as always, our student safety is important and is a priority. So we certainly would also be looking at how we can mitigate any issues. I have 2 other questions that came up. Is there a plan for the current Pickering building once it is vacated?
Sure, I think we touched on this a little bit in thinking about what the next steps are. Certainly, we recognize a need for spaces for the Sisson Elementary. I think there's a broader hope that we take steps for the elementary level across the city, and then that would enable Pickering to potentially serve the function of a swing space for some of those other projects for the classroom space that would be available here. So the short answer is it's to be determined based on the district's needs.
And then I have another question. If Pickering enrollment is being doubled and Sisson expanding into Pickering, and they're enrolled doubling, this will double the traffic in an area that is already has traffic problems. What are we going to do about that?
A couple things. So we've already addressed the simple thing, which was having the proper number of parking spaces on the campus so that all the faculty and staff can not be parking on the street and can be safely parked on the campus, like I said. The second thing is, and I had touched on it briefly, I don't have a definitive answer, except that a very important part of our consulting team is our traffic engineer, and they've been looking not only at the immediate campus, but all the arteries coming in, and they will be making recommendations for improvements not only on the site, but potential improvements off-site because of traffic.
You may have already answered this, but I want to respect the person who asked the question.
Sure.
How will the road construction schedule for March 2024 on Broadway and this construction at Pickering Sisson at the same time work? What a traffic nightmare.
Well, I'm not sure how much of a nightmare it's going to be, but we will have a contractor, a construction manager on board shortly, and we will be able to interface their approach to construction and staging with what the city has going on with other projects in the neighborhood. So, yeah.
We've also had an initial meeting with the engineers from that project, and we'll continue to have coordination meetings with them to mitigate any impacts.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so I just want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you for the thoughtful questions, and please continue to share your feedback as we go through this process so we can make it the best that it can be and end up with a school that we can all be really excited about. So with that, we will move into, the best way, the quickest way to get feedback to the school building team is through the dedicated Pickering website, and the addresses there on the screen, pickeringmsbuildingproject.com. Of course, anyone can reach out to our office or your school building committee person that you know. All right, and with that, we will move into the Pickering School Building Committee meeting. We want to call the roll.
Mayor Nicholson? Present. Brian Castellanos? Present. Deb Ruggiero?
Present.
Diana Turkudis? Lori McCool?
Present.
Jessica Gerardo? Jim Ridley?
Present.
John Ford? Joe Smart? Karen Miller? Kevin Ritterhouse? Lauren Drago? Lorraine Gately? Michael Bertino? Molly Cohen? Bertino, present. Online. Michael Donovan? Present. Molly Cohen? Present. Yeah. Peter Koulikides?
Present online.
Rich Marlin? Rick Starbird?
Present.
Tom Mannion?
Present.
Mayor McGee?
Present.
Wayne Lozey?
All right, so we have two items on the agenda. The first is the minutes, and then the next is a vote, a formal vote on the preferred option. So I think we distributed the minutes beforehand. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second? Any second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it on the minutes. The next is we remember at our last meeting, we walked through a version of this presentation and decided to make sure that we had this open comment. But we do need, if we're going to stay on track for the submission, to make a decision about the option. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Lynn?
Yes, if everyone feels comfortable, we would like to ask for a motion to approve a preferred option. As Gene said, his design team's recommended option is option 7 on the Sisson grounds. And as Mayor Nicholson said, we want to be able to submit our preferred schematic report to the MSBA by April 27th. So if everyone is comfortable making a decision on the preferred option based on the feedback we received here today, we would ask that someone make a motion to approve whichever option you think is best.
Thank you. I want to make a couple comments on everything. Thank you. And it was great to have the public meeting tonight to get the input from the community. And I just want to say that the building committee and all the work that's been going on has been looked at all different kinds of sites. We narrowed it down, recognized that there's not a lot of options in the community. Many of the sites didn't make sense at all, and we really narrowed it down and had a chance to really go through this at length. And I think not only we had the public meeting tonight, but the meetings have been public, and there's been a lot of feedback coming on. So I think we recognize we've been waiting a long time to build the school. The community needs the school, and it's been a challenge to find the right location. But I really believe that through all the work that we've done together, that this site that's being proposed is the right site, and it's an opportunity to build the school in a place that I think we can get the right product and the right building for the students in the community that need it. So I make a motion to accept the preferred proposal to give us option 7, that we approve that option and move forward and get this project on its way. So I make a motion to accept. Second.
Deb,
Second.
Deb, can you carry?
Second.
You got it.
Mayor Nicholson?
Yes.
Brian Castellanos?
Yes.
Deb Ruggiero?
Yes.
Diana Chakutis?
Yes.
Gloria McClure?
Yes.
Jessica Gerardo? Jim Ridley?
Yes.
John Ford? Joe Smart?
Yes.
Karen Miller? Kevin Ritterhouse?
Yes.
Karen was a yes.
Thank you, Karen. Lauren Drago?
Yes.
Lorraine Gately?
Yes.
Michael Bertino?
Yes.
Michael Donovan?
Yes.
Molly Cohen?
Yes.
Peter Koulikides?
Yes.
Rich Marlin?
Yes.
Rick Starbird?
Yes.
Tom Mannion?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes.
Wayne Lozey? Thank you.
All right, well, I want to thank you all again. Thank you, those of you who are online. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you for all your work throughout this process. Really excited to be moving forward. We will continue to keep everybody posted. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And that concludes the formal agenda. If someone wants to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Adjourn.